Drew here, and I honestly think this might have been the best overall episode of For All Mankind this season. Not that it was perfect, mind you, but that it was the best episode of the season, because I think that this show, as we've discussed it in the comments and thought about it, I feel like the biggest problem it has is that it's confused about whether or not it wants to be a show about how a pivotal moment in history could have changed all of society and all of history if it had happened differently, or if it's a story about a bunch of individuals having relationships and going about doing random stuff. And to me, these aren't completely incompatible, but to a certain extent, I feel like too much of this story has focused on the characters' relationships that could be in any show. And instead of focusing on how this timeline is different and how society has been shaped differently as a result. But this episode, I think, was a lot stronger in part because it focused on things that only this show can focus on for the most part. I thought the strongest scenes were the scenes that had a lot to do with diplomacy between Margot and the Russian character of Sergei. And I felt that they did a good job of showing how oftentimes in these situations you can have good desires, but that the political expediencies can kind of gum up everything and keep people from being as efficient as they would want to be. And in this situation, it was interesting because the Russian characters this episode, I felt that they were pretty consistently portrayed as good individuals that are kind of limited by the demands of their state, and that they have to fall, their actions have to fall within certain parameters as a result. But as individuals, they all seem to be decent sorts for the most part. I also really liked the scenes between Danny and the Russian cosmonauts where they were bonding together. I do feel that, Danny gives this speech about a dog that, is the first living human, the first living species to go into outer space. And, the Russian reveals that the dog died brutally and that it was propaganda, that it peacefully went to sleep. And Danny makes this speech about the dog dying for its trainers and for everyone that it loved, and not doing it for its country. It wasn't doing it, for that. It was doing it for the people it loved. And I feel like you really, really have to be a dog lover to buy that speech. I myself am not so much, so I found the speech a little cheesy. But I felt like the interactions between these characters, they revealed these cultural differences. And I particularly, like I said, liked the scene between Margot and Sergei. I felt like they did a good job of showing these individuals working to find a practical solution to a diplomatic problem. They had to figure out a way to make the spacecraft be able to lock together so that it wasn't creating tension because one side or the other had control of any part of the mechanism. And the lack of trust between the two sides and the way that they had to, take a step of faith and reveal their communication codes to each other. I thought this was all interesting stuff. I also liked the scene where Thomas Paine was talking about why he wants this program to succeed, why he wants this interaction between the Russian cosmonauts and the American astronauts to be a success, because he wants to show America leading the way at this dark time in history. And it's interesting because, apparently this is a real historical person. I'm not sure how much of this the real Thomas Paine would have said, but it's, an interesting and very idealistic viewpoint that he has, that, they can be this city on a hill and that they can show people the way to a better future through peaceful interaction. And it's interesting, there's a lot of this season, the trailers made it seem like there was going to be warfare on the moon, and maybe there still will be, but the way things are going so far, I'm thinking that's increasingly unlikely, because we've seen most of the clips that they kind of misleadingly cut together in the trailers to make it seem like there was going to be conflict on the moon. And it seems like the actual interactions between the Russians and the Americans have been a lot more positive up to this point. But there's still time for things to deteriorate and disintegrate. I thought, though, it was really pretty interesting, the interactions between these characters and just the way that decisions were made that, were basically these minor decisions, but they had to be made just for cosmetics, because people aren't willing to budge on these little decisions. I also thought his comrades' reactions when Sergei gave Margot the codes, or the frequencies rather, I thought that, their reaction, that they were clearly not ready for him to do that, and he could be in a lot of trouble. It'll be interesting to see what happens to his character after he takes this leap of faith in trusting Margot, and how this works out for him. I have a feeling he could get burned by his own country for it. So all those scenes, I think, were good, and I think those are the types of scenes that this show can do really well, and they should be doing and focusing on, because this is the type of show I think that it should be. But then it sits uncomfortably alongside all these other relationship scenes, which to me, I just don't think really fit too well within the series. I mean, some people have justifiably called this the most expensive soap opera currently on TV, and I don't think that's an unfair categorization, although I think that there's a lot more to it than that, obviously. But, the stuff with Ellen, again, this stuff, it's fine. It's, but I just don't think it has the heft that they want it to, because I don't think we care enough about Ellen as a character to really care about her decisions, to come out so that she can finally be with the woman that she loves. I don't think that they've developed her as a character enough. I don't think that we really ultimately are invested enough in her character enough to care about this. I think we're slightly more invested in the relationship between Gordo and Tracy. I think it's largely because they have more screen time. He's basically the number 2 lead on the show, so he is someone that we have more development for. We have had more time to grow to understand him as a character, and I feel like he's really made an impact this season as this lovable loser that is trying to get back on track. And again, I'm rooting for him. I tend to think, he goes to Tracy's husband and says, I'm going to get my wife back. And I feel like a lot of people will react to this scene. A lot of you will react to this scene and go, "Boo-rah, yeah, way to go, Gordo." But I think it's interesting because the way that they cast this scene, Tracy's husband, obviously he comes into the room and he's constantly showing off how much money he has. He's talking about the $1,500 wine. He's talking about his books and how you can't take any of them without a library card. He's emphasizing repeatedly his possessions. And you would think that they would, have cast him as more of a jerk and shown him to be very possessive of Tracy, to view her as a possession. But he seems to have this understanding that she is different, that she is not a possession. He basically tells Gordo, I could punch you out, but the thing is, if Tracy wants to go with you, I can't stop you. And if she wants to go with me and stay with me, you're not going to get her back. So good luck. And the way that this show has gone down, the way that they've set this up, I feel like she's not going to end up with Gordo. I feel like that would be the straightforward thing to happen, is for him to win her back. But I think this show is a little bit more complex than that. Or if he is going to win her back, I think it's going to be a longer road. It's not going to be, in this season per se. But we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I am rooting for him. But as I said, this relationship stuff, honestly, it feels like it belongs in a different show, because I feel like this show should really be about how the space race affected society, and what does Ellen and Gordo's stories have to do with that, really. Likewise, I would say something similar. I think that a lot of this stuff is buoyed by really good performances. I think that particularly the scene where Kelly Baldwin is talking to Ed and Karen about how they ended up adopting her, it was really buoyed. I thought, honestly, the actor in this scene that really stood out to me was Cynthia Wu. And I mean, Joel Kinnaman is a very charismatic actor, and he has a lot of ability to emote and just carry an audience along with his reactions to things. But in this scene, I felt that just the sensitivity that Cynthia Wu showed, and the way that she just kind of would be watchful and listening, and her reactions, I thought that she kind of carried the emotional weight of this scene as we watch her trying to figure out who she is and to learn, kind of more about why her parents adopted her. And I thought, it was really touching, that scene where she was writing, that she's from a country, the country of Vietnam, that she never knew, and parents that she never knew. So that, that would be really challenging for her to not know her own identity. And I think it's really, an interesting thing for a TV show to explore. But I'm not sure that this is the show that should be exploring it, because to me, I feel like this show should be more focused on how the goals of the space race affect individuals. And this is kind of a separate thing. Like, you could basically explore this in a show where the Russians didn't beat Americans to the moon. The same goes for Ellen and Gordo and all these other plot lines. And I get that you have to pad out your runtime with some, trivial plot lines, but I feel like the ratio of trivial plot lines to meaningful plot lines has really gotten out of whack this season compared to last season. Lastly, we had some interesting sequences both on the ground in the simulation with Ed showing the noob how it's done. This scene, it got really, really inside baseball as far as the space terminology and what he was doing to pilot the craft but I felt like it was pretty clear, even from someone who doesn't really understand like the technicalities of what they're describing. To me, it was like, okay, so clearly Ed is showing him that he's an expert and he knows what he's doing. And, he's kind of showing him, look, this is how it's done, rookie. And to me, it's interesting because I feel like Ed has been very, very cocky this season. And it's interesting because we've already seen, him have one accident due to his cockiness. And I kind of foresee that he could have another based on the way that he continues to be very, very cocky. I think he thinks he's, the old pro, and it's going to be interesting to see if he really is as hot stuff as he thinks he is. I tend to think that he could be heading for another crash. I also thought, the scenes with Tracy, that you see her and them firing these weapons in space for the first time, something I don't believe that's ever happened, but it was, a well-shot scene. I thought it was kind of interesting. They played it for some humor. And I, also appreciated just the moment where she took a second to just talk to Deke, who's obviously been dead, and just to, talk to him about the permanence of his state as opposed to the impermanence of things on Earth, and kind of, also reminiscing on her own relationship and how things have changed for her. And I think this might be hinting at the reason that she ultimately won't go back to Gordo, that the impermanence of their situation, she has recognized it and has recognized that whatever she had with Gordo, she's moved on, that it was not something permanent. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. So overall for me, the stuff with the diplomacy and the Russians and the figuring out a solution so that we can get this mission off the ground, I thought that stuff was all great. The stuff with the relationship drama, not so much. The stuff with them going into space and shooting guns and kind of dwelling on what it means to go to the moon and the differences between what they're accomplishing there and what is being accomplished on Earth. In the relationship side of things, again, good stuff. So to me, I feel like this was like a 2/3, 1/3 split, whereas I feel like a lot of episodes this season have been, like 2/3 relationship, 1/3 other stuff. So to me, the ratio was a little better this week, but still I feel like this season and the show on the whole, I think the first season was a lot better, but the show on the whole has had too much dwelling on relationships that don't really matter because they could have been in any show. And I think that's my chiefest frustration. But overall, I'm still enjoying this series. I still think that it's well worth the time to watch. So let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.